What happens in the sky affects life down here on Earth. The celestial compass shows you how and guides your way with astrology you can use from professional astrologer Kathy Beal. Every episode features her light-hearted, practical forecasts and navigational tips, blended with humor, optimism, and a love of patterns, symbolism, and pop culture references. Kathy translates technicalities into concepts that apply to real life. You'll learn how the current moment ties to where we've been, from the recent past to cycles that last happened years ago, and get a look at where we're heading. And much more, from special topics to special guests. The Celestial Compass, enlightening, entertaining, and empowering. Here's your host, Kathy Beal.
Greetings, Earthlings. This is Kathy Beal of EmpowermentUnlimited.net, welcoming you to July 2025. And we have some really intense, chaotic aspects characterizing July. You might have already noticed it, but as of our recording this on the 7th, all of the outer planets are now fully and firmly in new signs, having a collaboration in energy that we have not experienced in this way in our lifetimes, and from what every astrologer I have seen has looked into ever. It's really quite remarkable. Uranus is now in the sign of Gemini, where it will stay into the fall, and then next year it will come back in fully. It was last there in the 1940s, and it is connecting easily with Saturn and Neptune now, both Saturn and Neptune in the sign of Aries. So it's opening to spiritual guidance, to creativity, to maybe something quite a little more nefarious than that. And it's also moving into an easy flow with Pluto in Aquarius. So we have big changes in how we communicate, options, unusual possibilities, things that we never even foresaw as possible now starting to spring into being. So keep your eyes open. We are getting a heads up for what things are going to be like more fully next year. This week brings a moment of sitting and thinking about how we feel, or maybe feeling how we feel about all this. So while all this chaos is going on, we have a full moon in the sign of Capricorn, not normally a particularly emotional moon at all. In fact, it's the antithesis of Cancer, the opposite sign. It's daddy moon. It's all about providing. And we may find ourselves really experiencing the impact on ourselves of like what's going on with how safe we feel with institutions, with goals that we've been working on. And although a full moon often has a very strong moment of release, this one may be more of an energetic disconnecting, and the release and the extricating may actually be a bit down the line. So please remember, Jupiter is in Cancer. That's the sign of nurturing. Do go back into yourself. It's appropriate to nest, to take care of your own needs. And if you find yourself eating a tub of ice cream or a bunch of cookies, you can be forgiven. But spend time doing things that make you feel safe and secure. Spend time with people you love. Spend time engaging in activities and situations that remind you why you're here and why you're striving. Mercury's also going to be going retrograde later in the month, and I have a guide to this at omtimes.com. It's called How to Handle Mercury Retrograde in 2025. So I encourage you to look for that. And as always, my monthly and new and full moon forecasts are at omtimes.com, as well as at my site, empowermentunlimited.net, where you can also get weekly podcasts. And all of that is at my YouTube channel, which is Professional Aquarian. So there you go. And now I am pleased to welcome a guest who is absolutely appropriate for today's Venus Pluto trine. I didn't set it up with that in mind, but it worked out. So the two planets of love and desire are collaborating today, and we have with us the author of Stellar Sex: Unlock Your Sexual Power with Erotic Astrology, Aubrey Houdeshell. She is a writer, astrologer, and lover of all things ethereal. Her work focuses mainly on the transformative and healing potential contained within the exploration and knowledge of the self. Her works include Stellar Sex, which we will talk about, the Oracle of Pluto, which we will talk about, and the Cosmic Symposium. Her educational background, I always find this fascinating, is in linguistics, writing, and French. So, welcome.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about the book. So,
Well, before we do that, I always like to ask people how they came to astrology. So, what is your origin story?
okay. So, I've always been a person who's really into all of the sort of like self-analysis things, right? Whether that is astrology or Myers-Briggs or, any of that, right? And so I've always had like a casual interest, I will say, in astrology since I was quite young. But my best girlfriend at the time, we had been best friends forever and ever and ever. And I was probably 20 years old, maybe 21. And I happened to be at her house, and she came to me and she was like, Aubrey, we're going to look up your birth chart. And I didn't know what that was, so I asked her, and I was like, I already know I'm a Libra, like what else could I possibly need to know? And she said, oh no, that's just one thing in the chart. And so she helped me to pull up my birth chart on cafeastrology.com, actually. And they have that huge report that they'll give you for free on that website. And so she plopped me down on the couch with my birth chart on my phone, and I spent, the next hour or so reading through it. And my mind was absolutely blown by all of the things that it sort of revealed about me. And I have been hooked ever since.
That is such a girlfriend intro. Hi, let's go do this fun thing.
Excuse me. Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
so, how did you study? Did you just read and learn? Did you take classes? How'd you get further with it?
No, I'm pretty much self-taught. I would say that's how I tend to tackle most things, excuse me. So, once I discovered my own birth chart, then I started going around to all my friends, was like, let's pull up your chart, let's pull up your chart, let's pull up your chart, and started, learning and reading through doing that with my friends. And then, of course, I started diving into books and watching all kinds of videos. And it just sort of snowballed, from there.
Yep, yep. So you have something in fire in your chart, I'm guessing.
My
Um,
my South Node is in Leo.
well, there you go. Now, you say that your work blends tarot astrology and numerology, and you call it folk magic.
Oh, I do not
So,
call that folk
uh,
magic.
huh?
I don't call that folk magic. No, no.
You don't call, no, but you don't call what you do folk magic?
No.
I read something wrong on your site. Okay,
Oh,
so
I apologize. No.
no, 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 no. But you blend those three things, right, in your work?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And so how did you weave the tarot and the numerology part into it?
Oh, well, they're all separate things that I offer, right? Like at this point, those are all things that I have learned and studied and offer to people. Well, at this point, actually, it's mostly astrology that I focus on, but
Mhm.
I definitely still offer tarot readings to people. So yeah, they were just things that through my exploration and my own sort of spiritual journey that caught my eye and that I found very interesting. And of course, one of the systems that corresponds to the major arcana and tarot is astrology. So,
Mhm. So, what's the approach you take with your astrological work? Do you have a term for it, a framework?
at first I was like, oh yeah, I'm an evolutionary astrologer. At this point, I very much blend traditional, Hellenistic astrology with more modern astrology.
Ah,
And so, yeah, so, just I'm sure you can relate, but throughout your own journey around learning astrology, it's something you could study, for your entire life. And I've currently, right now, I'm like very much into traditional astrology and some of the more, you know, niche techniques, I would say, that maybe not every single astrologer uses. And it's the current rabbit hole I'm going down.
Well, it is a subject that invites constant evolutionary in your approach to it. Like it used to be that people largely went to meetings, big conferences, and you'd go to those and you'd hear all these different talks, and then you'd spend hundreds of dollars on books and tapes. That was during the cassette tape time. Things have shifted. A lot of stuff is online now, but every time, you go to something like that and then suddenly, oh my God, I have to learn this. Oh, Time Lords. I must learn about Time. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
Well, so how did this lead you to erotic astrology? What's the path to that?
So I will say I have Venus as a chart ruler, okay, and it's conjunct Pluto, and so there
There we
is
go.
right. So there's a part of me that is very sexual, sort of naturally, and I'm sure you can relate to this, but like the number one thing that people want to get readings on or know about is love, right? Love and relationships. And so over time, I have given, many a love compatibility, synastry, composite reading. And it was just something that based off of kind of the experiences I was having with clients that sort of evolved naturally, and I was like, well, like this isn't really a part or a branch of astrology that I see a ton of discussion on,
Mhm.
which was sort of funny to me because it's such a huge focus in people's lives, right? And so I started diving into it, and I literally designed a sextrology reading to have that be the focus and to start, kind of doing my own field research, if you will, around those things. And over time, it just kind of evolved and was like, okay, we can look at the entire chart, through this lens of sextrology and see how that really kind of informs or manifests in a person.
And as we were discussing before the show started, there's not a lot in current astrological books on this topic.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And the ones that we know of are kind of from a little while ago. So I was like, we just need something a little more contemporary, so that's where I came from with that.
Now I noticed that you divide the book. It's in the like an old, for want of a better word, an old school cookbook format. Like it's like takes the different possible placements by sign, and then later there's a way to bring them all together. But I
Mhm.
noticed that you divide it from between the personal planets, the social planets. I like that term for Jupiter and Saturn, and then the
Mhm.
generational planets. Is this something you came up with, this particular way of looking at things?
I think, yeah, that's like a way that it works really well in my brain. And it's all my other book, The Cosmic Symposium, is also just divided that way. And so I was like, well, that format, that template worked well for me. So I'm just going to kind of apply it over here. And designing it in the sort of cookbook way, that was intentional because I figured, this will be a book where people are going to want to flip to
Mhm.
their own placements, right? It's not necessarily a book that they would read cover to cover all the way through. And so I just felt that, organizing it in that fashion would make it easy for people to be like, okay, here's the moon. Okay, here's Venus. Okay, here's Saturn, right? And here's my placements. And now here's your placements. And yeah,
Yeah, everybody always just flips to their
exactly.
own
No,
stuff. It's
exactly.
a truism.
Yes,
I don't care.
absolutely. I've done it a million times, in astrology books. Feeling curious what somebody has to say about me. And yeah, I just kind of know that about people, I guess. So I felt that it would be an easy way for people to use the book.
So, do you have, or can you make, is there a way to make a statement about the difference in the role that personal, social, and generational planets would play?
So there's always a caveat, right? But generally speaking, when we're thinking about the personal planets, these are energies that we're feeling and interacting with and embodying every single day, right? We sort of feel and see and interact with the personal planets the most. On where things are in your chart and what's happening. But and the personal planets vary so much between people, right? Whereas the social planets move a little bit slower, and that's where we start to see kind of like larger groups of people having the same placements. And then the generational planets obviously are even bigger, groups of people than that. And certainly like Pluto, for example, right? You can have enormous groups of people that have that same placement. And so I also kind of like to describe the social and generational planets, the generational planets in particular, as maybe that kind of like umbrella theme that we kind of like work and feel with over time. Like the themes are kind of always there, like in the background, right? Whereas like the personal planets are a little more upfront.
And yeah, it makes complete sense. But you put other things in as well. All right, so you have a few asteroids, uh, Juno, which
Mhm.
makes sense, and Vesta, and also Eros. So how is it that you honed in on those three?
Again, just through like firsthand experience with clients, right? And through kind of my own research and understanding the archetypes and what they represent. And Eros literally being like erotic physical expressions of desire made perfect sense, just as Mars is the planet of sex makes perfect sense for the erotic astrology. And then Vesta, I chose to include because it's devotion, right? And so it shows who and what we are devoted to and how we tend to express that devotion. My Venus is in Scorpio. Okay. So devotion's a big thing for me. And so I felt like that would be kind of like a nice and different element to include in the book. And then Juno as the literal archetype of the spouse,
Hmm.
again, kind of like an obvious draw there.
And Juno doesn't move really quickly, right? So it's not really generational, but it's not like a personal planet. Right?
Close. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm thinking about all my high school classmates and like, how does this fit? I have a 29-degree Juno, so I'm
Oh,
like
you do? Oh, and what? Fine.
Sagittarius,
Interesting. Okay.
isn't it? Yes, yes, and it's trine my natal Jupiter, so
Oh,
that's
oh my goodness. What is your big three? You're an Aquarius sun.
Pisces rising and Leo moon.
Oh my goodness. Okay. And what fire sign is your Jupiter in?
Leo,
Perfect. Oh, I love that. Love that.
and that's more than anyone has ever gotten out of me publicly about
Oh
my
yeah, I
chart.
didn't know. Like I was like, I'm not putting you on the spot, and this is information you don't want to share.
I
Okay.
wouldn't have if no, no, no. The year was not anywhere in there, so we're fine.
And I won't ask. You know what I mean?
So how well, you also have the nodes and the vertex. So can you explain some about how those would fit in?
Absolutely. So vertex as one of our little mathematical points, right, that we have in the chart, it points to fate, right? So it points to fated meetings, fated events, and maybe that's like the romantic in me, I guess. But I do think vertex is an interesting point to consider when we're thinking about our relationships that we have with people, because how often you like hear somebody be like, oh, it was fate that we met, or it was destiny, or they're my soulmate, or whatever. And so looking at how the vertex was activated around their meeting, or perhaps is activated together, is, I think, an interesting element to add in. And I think also understanding where your own vertex is, right? And thinking to yourself, like, okay, so maybe if they have their sun on top of my vertex, that could be kind of like a more powerful connection with somebody. And then the nodes, I mean, it's destiny, right? It's fate. It's maybe fate isn't the right word, but it's what we're here to do, right? It's really what we're here working on. And so I think as we move through life and we grow and evolve and change, certainly our own wants, needs, and desires in our romantic and sexual connections change also. And I think it could be helpful to consider, like, hey, through the lens of erotic astrology, what are my nodes asking of me? How do those show up? Or how does tapping into perhaps what my north node desires influence, right, my experience around sex and love?
And the nodal contacts between people, or if someone has something on your node,
Oh, yeah,
also can be a real draw, right?
absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
So it serves some of the same function as the vertex. Not exactly, but
Yeah,
it's an
you're right.
echo of what the vertex is up to.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely.
Interesting, interesting. So when you give someone this style of reading, do people generally go, well, that makes sense, or
Yeah,
huh, now I understand? Because people aren't unified in their approach to things, and there are often a lot of contradictions. And wouldn't this approach show where one part of you is drawn to one thing, and there's another part of you that's not entirely comfortable with it, maybe?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. In my experience, I think people have found those readings to be really validating, right? Because it does kind of unlock the complexity, excuse me, of our erotic nature. Because absolutely, we feel drawn to one thing or the other, and sometimes both, and sometimes they fit, and sometimes they don't. And I think just having that knowledge, right, around how your natal chart and the natal promise has brought forward, this energy for you and can help you to not only like better understand yourself, but to own it. Right. And to be able to move forward in a more honest and empowered way, to then ideally have more fulfilling connections with other people.
That is quite the Venus and Scorpio statement. I'm sorry, I had to say that.
I don't
So
mind. I don't mind.
it's not as full bodied as having a reading with you, but this book does impart some of that level of understanding of the self if somebody were to read this, right?
Absolutely. That was my
So
goal.
that was your goal. Yeah, I was wondering, like, what do you want the reader to come away with after looking at this book?
Yeah, I mean, I want them to have a greater understanding of themselves. And essentially, I'm looking for them to walk away with exactly what I want my clients to walk away with during these readings, right? I want them to feel validated. I want them to feel seen and understood and empowered, not only in like their knowledge of the self around what it is that they really do want and need from other people, but to ideally have like language around it. There's my
Mhm.
background in linguistics, right? To have language around it, and to be able to share, right, to communicate with their partner or partners around like, hey, this is what I really need, right? This is what I really want. This is what feels exciting or fulfilling or safe to me, because all of those elements are very important.
And it all creates self-awareness and then candor with the self, in theory, translates to candor with another person, which then makes for an easier flow, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay. Wow. Could you have your book there, right? Could you
I do,
hold it up
yeah.
and show people? Yay. Okay. And this is
Yes,
this is a Llewellyn publication,
it is, yeah.
and it's just now published, right?
Yeah, it comes out tomorrow. It
Comes
comes
out
out
tomorrow.
tomorrow morning. Yeah,
All
amazing.
right. So everyone, you're getting an early glimpse of it all. Um, Is there something, I mean, I know that it always depends on the chart and it varies from person to person, but is there something that you pretty much always hone in on really, really early on in looking at someone's chart? Do you have a launching point generally?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, for me, if I pull up somebody's chart, I'm always going to be like, okay, where's Venus? Where's Mars? Where are the nodes? What are they doing?
Hmm.
Where's Pluto? Where's Eros? Because, that's kind of the gateway into sexastrology is definitely Mars and Venus before it is anything else.
Do you notice do their transits in the sky give you information much with this, or is this just looking at what's happening in a person's chart?
I mean, obviously, I think the transits play a role, right? I think a lot of time, or a lot of my experience I've had so far, anyways, is people just kind of wanting to understand their natal chart. And certainly, if I feel like one of their points are activated by a major transit, then I will discuss that, and how I feel like that could bring elements around safety or desire or whatever it is, right? And for them, of course, to be paying attention to that and working with it and thinking about it. But by and large, I think people just mostly want to know, like, hey, my natal placements.
Explain me to me.
Right, exactly. Right, exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
it's everyone's favorite topic. So
That's right.
let's see. Well, this seems like a good, a good stopping point for our only break. So everyone, hang in. We'll be back in a couple of minutes with a lot more.
Om Times TV.
Want help with your own celestial compass? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, for Astro Insight forecasts for each week, month, and new and full moon. Want to explore the personal impact? Make a decision? Understand another person? It is possible. Click the Services tab to book a personal session with me. That address again? empowermentunlimited.net.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We're talking today with Aubrey Houdeshell, who is the author of Stellar Sex, Unlock Your Sexual Power with Erotic Astrology. Now, this is not your first book.
No.
Tell us about your first one.
Okay, well, technically, the first thing I published was this deck, and then my first book is the Cosmic Symposium, which is an astrology book. Okay, it is an astrology book, and that is about all of the planets. It is, in fact, only about the planets. I do not discuss any signs really in this book, and the reason for that is because I feel that understanding the archetypal energy and journey of each of the planets is extremely important. So I actually, the person that did the art, right, designed and did the art for the deck, designed and did the art for this book. Let me see,
it's beautiful.
Yeah, she's colorful, right? I'm like, she has all of these beautiful full page illustrations in here. So like, here's the one for the sun. Can you see that?
You got someone to do interior color printing.
Yeah, so both the deck and the Cosmic Symposium are published by Running Press. And the editor, I'm am I allowed to say her name? The editor her name is Shannon, that we worked with on the deck. Everybody loves Rose's art because she's very talented, right? And they just loved the art that she did for the deck so much that when we approached them with a second project, they were just like, yep. Like, you do whatever you want. We'll absolutely do full color, pages for you guys. And so, I like it because I think it makes it a little bit different as far as astrology books are concerned. They're usually not heavily illustrated, not full color. So yeah, it makes it just a little something different.
So are they having conversations? I have to say, I have not seen this book. So it's just going through the myth or the archetype, or are they actually having a symposium talking with each other in this book?
So I love that you asked that question. So that entire book is based off of Musica Universalis. It is a Pythagorean theorem. Are you familiar with it?
Vaguely. Please
Okay.
explain for people.
So it's a Pythagorean theorem where Pythagoras was like, hey, everything vibrates, and therefore every sound is made up of vibrations, right? And everything in the universe vibrates. And so therefore it sort of follows that all of the planets up in the sky are also, vibrating, just like everything else in the universe, and therefore must put off their own sound. Right. And so if you've ever heard of the music of the spheres, right, that's okay. Perfect. So it's all connected to that. And, Rose and I were discussing that one day, and I was like, that is the perfect metaphor for the birth chart. And like, we all have our own personal cosmic symposiums, right, that are going on based off of our own like planetary placements in the chart. And so each chapter discusses the sort of archetypal, historical, myth, legend, etc., that goes along with each of the respective planets. And it does, there's plenty of things about music throughout the entire book. And, the idea is like, okay, now that we kind of understand the respective instrument, if you will, that's being played by each of the planets, how can we bring that together to create our own personal music of the spheres?
And this is just dealing with the archetype, not in the clothing of their signs.
Correct.
Fascinating. When was this published?
So this was published last year. So came out in October of last year. So not quite a year old yet, but she will be soon. And yeah, thank you for asking about the Cosmic Symposium. I really appreciate it. I'm very proud of it. I think it's actually, not to toot my own horn here, okay, but I do think it's actually a very well done book. I mean, there's a lot of research that went into it. And I do think that it offers, like I said, kind of like a unique lens to think about astrology through.
So it's almost like, it sounds like it's related to shamanic astrology, where you basically get to know the personalities of each planet.
I think that's
Maybe?
a good connection to make. Yeah,
Okay,
I think that's
right.
a good connection to make.
Okay, so now backing up, tell us about the Pluto Oracle. First, you have that lovely box. There we go. Venus and Scorpio here.
Wow. Okay. You're not kidding. So it's a magnetic box, right? So it's a nice solid packaging. So it opens up, and then inside we've got our book, and then in there we've got all of our cards. Oh, there goes the book. I'll show you. Here's the background.
Is that a scarab?
It's a Scorpio. It's a
scorpion. There we go. Yeah.
And then just like as an example, right, there's one of the cards. So they're all shadow puppets. Okay. And so you can see Rose was clever enough to design the actual like hand, gosh, this backwards camera, to design the actual like hand movements, right, that you make to like make the real shadow puppet on the wall.
Why do I not know about this deck? This is ingenious.
Yeah, so the entire, sorry, I gotta like put these cards back in here. The entire framework lens through which the deck was designed is around that kind of shadow journey of Pluto, right? Hence the shadow puppets. But Rose is a Pisces, and so we wanted a little bit of whimsy, right, to go along in there. And her idea also behind the shadow puppets was, you know, enabling you to tell your own story with, you know, the different shadow puppets that you would create as well. So it is an oracle deck. Obviously, it's not a tarot deck, so it's different.
How did you choose the individual symbols? I mean,
She did, right? Yeah. So it was originally her concept. I want to be very clear about that. It was her concept, and she was like, "I want to design the deck, but I don't want to write the deck." And I said, "I'll write the deck," and she said, "Great." Yeah, she just came at me with a list of cards, and was like, "Okay, here we go." You know, I added in like two. I think I added in two cards to the whole thing that she obviously designed. But yeah, it was totally, that was like her concept. Well, the shadow puppets were her concept. And then I brought in the idea of like the shadow work with Pluto. And she was like, yeah, we're going to do that. So.
and what are some of the like the freestanding cards? What are some of the images and names that you have in there?
So the first card that was ever designed and ever written was the goat. So we've got the goat, but then there are some special cards in there like the shadow person, which is quite literally your shadow, right? And there is another one in there called the friend, which is the only card that is not, you know, a shadow puppet. It's a picture of like an actual bunny, right, standing kind of behind a candle, and the candle is casting its light on the bunny, and then it's like real shadow behind it. So that's another special card that's in there. But other ones would include like the gazelle, the penguin, the goose, right? So there's all kinds of little creatures going on in there. And then, like I said, there's some special cards in there that kind of add, you know, that extra element to it.
So is the intention that someone just select one card, or can you come up with a spread?
So I included 3 different spreads in the guidebook to kind of help people, you know, dive in and figure out how to start reading. Obviously, you can pull just one card, like just like you can with any other deck, and if you know you just want a message, that's totally fine. But yeah, there are 3 different spreads in there that kind of evolve in number of cards and complexity.
And it's something more than past, present, and future, I'm guessing.
I don't have past, present, and future in there at all.
Would you be game to select a couple of cards for the collective now, or is that putting you on the spot?
That is putting me on the spot a little bit, but I will if you would like me to.
I think you might sell a lot of decks with this, is what I'm thinking.
Okay. Well, please allow me to shuffle the cards.
I joke. For the past year and a half, I've gotten a deck and I've gone, this is it. I don't need any more tarot decks. And after I got that with the Cache o Pepe, which is a food-based deck, and the very next day, I found out that there was a Hirschfeld Broadway tarot based on the drawings of Al Hirschfeld, and I went, dirty word, must own this. And and then someone gave me a Hocus Pocus deck, and now it's just like hopeless. Like, I'm not even going to say no more decks. I think I have 1,000 easily. And I had the feeling,
literally 1,000?
I think so, and I think that this may join it.
You are so funny.
I think shadow puppets are real interesting and real important, and I can think of therapists who might find this a really, really interesting way to approach things with their
I love
clients.
that. I love that so much. Okay, so I did pull a couple cards here. Okay. So we've got the unicorn. I'm like trying, gosh, how do I get this right with this camera? I got the unicorn.
You got it
Then
right.
we've got the pigeon. Okay.
Interesting.
Yes. So when we are thinking about the pigeon, ultimately this is a card that signals we're kind of like on the last steps of our journey here, right? So we can see the shoreline, okay? And so obviously the encouragement there is to keep going, right? To recognize like, hey, we're really approaching the end of this journey. Maybe we've come a really long way and we're tired, but we can see the finish line, which for me, I think makes sense around the general astrology of 2025, right? We have so many major shifts that are happening this year, and most of them kind of bouncing back and forth between this new sign and therefore this new chapter that's really wanting to open up, while still having to simultaneously, close out the old chapter. And as the planets move and shift between their old signs and their new signs, we are on the last steps of a journey, right? We really are getting ready to close out some significant chapters in our lives, and getting ready to also open up, right, some significant chapters in our life. And then when we're thinking about the unicorn, this feels appropriate to me for Uranus and Gemini, and that shift this morning, because the unicorn is all about our uniqueness, right? And it is about the parts of ourselves that we should be allowing to shine. Okay. And with the unicorn actually brings this kind of moment of fate around it as well, which again, I think tying back into the pigeon, that's like, hey, we're almost there. And there's something fated, right, about these major endings that are happening astrologically. A lot of the energy being energy that we're literally never going to see again, in our lifetimes once they're done. And so, as we kind of move forward into these big new chapters that are emerging, how can we kind of embrace that elusive energy of the unicorn, and really allow for like something brand new to blossom in our lives?
It's funny, unicorn is something that a lot of people I know will claim like
Oh, really?
that they're a unicorn. And so this makes sense to me because it's almost like going from being the ordinary
Mhm.
earthly pigeon, and pigeon's a pretty prosaic being,
Yes,
to this magical
absolutely.
sparkly thing. Wee, and
Hmm.
it's like it's real.
Hmm.
And that to me sounds very much like the way of proceeding in this absolutely unfamiliar territory
I totally.
that that all of this fire and air energy in the outer planets is pushing for us. I know some people who'll be quite happy with this. Thank you very much for doing that.
Thank
Uh,
you.
and I think it bodes well for uh, a topic that a lot of my listeners and viewers are really obsessed with. So you can read
Mm.
what you want into that, my friends. I think it's a good answer to the ongoing question that we will leave unspoken. So, do you
I'm
have
glad, I'm
any?
glad it aligned. I'm glad it feels like a sign.
It does. It just feels like a sign. I can make everything be a sign if I look at
Me
it
too.
enough.
Oh my God, same.
So, are you? Is your work evolving? Is there anything you are now moving toward? Or are you just in the, oh my God, I finished this book and now I'm going to go tell everybody I know about it phase?
Obviously, I'm going to tell everybody I know about my book, right? But one thing about me, is I was born during a Mars cazimi, and my Sun and my Mars are conjunct my ascendant. So I'm always, 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 on the move. Let's go. What's the next thing, etc. So you're literally going to be the only person that knows this. But I am under contract with Llewellyn for another book. Um,
Oh,
it is an astrocartography book, which is my other obsession. So the fact that you
okay.
brought up your Uranus line, before we hopped on here, I was like, love some astrocartography. So I am in the process of writing that, and that will come out at some point in 2026.
So for the viewers, explain briefly what is astrocartography?
So astrocartography is a form of locational astrology. It was sort of created and developed and born into the world back in the 70s by a man named Jim Lewis. It essentially what it does is it takes all of your different placements in your chart and it translates them to longitude and latitude lines and throws them up on the world map. And the idea is that when we visit or live, in kind of these various places where we have lines, it activates that part of your chart and therefore that part of your life, and is means and does various different things depending on the type of line that you're underneath. And sometimes you have many lines in one location and sometimes you have none. But yeah.
And there's no one place that's everything. When people come, they want to talk about this. There's some places you can get more of what you're interested in met, but
Yeah.
there's no one place that's the perfect. Every aspect of your life will be good, right?
Absolutely. And a lot of that also has to do with the fact that nobody has a perfect birth chart, right? So surprise. So you could go somewhere, just as I'll give myself as an example, I guess. So living here in Denver, I live underneath my sun line, my Mars line, my Saturn line, and my moon line. But then when you take into account the other types of lines, we have aspect lines. I also live under a sun square the midheaven line, Mars square the midheaven line, the parents, which are like the latitude lines. In astrocartography, I live underneath a Jupiter-Neptune crossing, a Jupiter-Chiron crossing, and maybe a Neptune Chiron crossing. I can't remember the third one. But so not all of those energies are great, right? Some of them are. Some of them are wonderful, and I'm very glad I live underneath them. And others, maybe not so much.
You certainly would not have a life of sitting on the couch eating bonbons. With all
No. No.
you're
Not
very motivating. That's
yeah,
a
not underneath the Mars line. Not underneath the Mars line. So do you live, what do you live underneath?
I live west of my Pluto line. I grew up on my Saturn line. I can tell you stories.
Yeah,
I
I
spent
bet you
decades
do.
on my Saturn line.
Yeah,
No
me too.
more,
Me too.
but nothing else. Just the Saturn line. Like, yep.
Yeah, I'm sure we could talk about that for several hours.
I'm sure we could.
Oh my
It
goodness.
took moving away for people to notice. Oh, now we miss her. Like,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Relatable.
That
Yeah,
does.
relatable.
Um, someone has put a comment: "Embrace the unicorn."
Yeah, embrace the
In
unicorn.
response to the message. I know this individual, and thank you, thank you for the embrace the unicorn comment. So, what else? We've got another 8 minutes. Anything else about your life, your views, anything you want to talk about, explore, publicize,
Oh gosh.
comment on? You have a podium.
I
Here's your
know, I
platform.
like I do, but I'm not prepared with anything else. Um, I don't know. No, I mean, honestly, I think we covered more than I thought we were going to, honestly. We covered way more than I thought we were going to. So I mean, if you have any other burning questions, like certainly I'm here. But other than that, I mean, I just appreciate you having me on and letting me come on here and yap at you for an hour straight. So yeah, I really seriously thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. I like talking to authors of, especially of books that are adding something
Mm.
to the astrological vernacular, because you'll see things and you'll go, why was this published? But I did not. With yours, I went, oh yes, yes, this is a burning need. We were talking beforehand about earlier books on
Mm.
astrology and sex, and I am a couple of generations earlier than you in all of this. And in the like the 80s and 90s, there were books that were all sun sign oriented, and they split things. We were discussing, they split things up from like Aries man, Aries woman. That is an outmoded way of looking at things. Um,
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, that sextrology, it's literally titled Sextrology, book that we were talking about. Like I told you, there's a ton of good information in that book. But we just needed something more modern, right? More reflective of um what we know now, right? And as somebody whose entire friend group falls under like the queer umbrella in some way, I was like, oh, the gender binary is not going to work for us. Like, we're going to have to push past that. And and I was very intentional in my approach when writing the book, that it's very important for me that the language was inclusive, and that it not only was inclusive of any and all gender expressions, sexual orientations, but also the types of relationships that we have, right? Like, I recognize not everybody's monogamous, right? And I think just people feel alienated. You know what I mean? They do. They feel alienated in a lot of discussions and books and things like that. And I think, especially through my experience giving these sextrology readings, you would be surprised maybe how many people I talk to that are practicing some other form, some other type of relationship besides monogamy. And so it's like, well, just do my best to put something out there that feels like there's something in it for everybody.
I learned long ago, don't make assumptions.
Right.
I have a long background as an attorney, and
Oh, really?
for a long stretch of time, I would say the bulk of my client base was gay men, few
Mm.
lesbian couples, mostly gay men, and I was always astonished to find out who had been married. Like, oh, I don't make assumptions. Like, okay, you tried this, or convention bore down on you, and you tried to make it work, and no. So it would make sense to me that a book like this would then it recognizes that a lot of people are just on a journey, and some of it's kind of fluid, and it kind of goes here and it goes there, and maybe it's part of
Absolutely.
discovering who you are and what you really need.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm with you. I know so many people that have tried all kinds of things, right, on their journey to finding authenticity in themselves and who they are and what they want. So yeah, I think that's beautiful. I love that you were an attorney.
For a long time.
I love that. So how did you move from being an attorney to being an astrologer?
Oh, they were parallel for decades. For decades. I got Uranus crossed my midheaven, and
Okay.
I
Mhm.
was fired from my job. I was trying to be normal, and I went, well, screw that. And I had my own law practice and started going to astrology school. So
Oh my gosh. Okay, I love that. It makes sense. Uranus, the literal planet of astrology, crossing your midheaven. Okay, interesting. Where are you? Where's your Venus and where's your Mars?
oh, my Venus is in Pisces and my Mars is in Sag. And yes, they are square.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Is Jupiter opposite your sun?
Nope.
Okay. They're just in opposite signs. Um, Interesting. Obviously, we love an exalted Venus. Is it on your ascendant?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I love that for you. We love a Venus rising in the chart.
I had a one-woman show called Venus Rising and Tripping: Songs of Love and Delusion.
Oh my God. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Oh, I would
Yeah,
love
first
to
little Venus joke. Yep. Mhm. Oh, got a
interesting.
reaction from the producer over that one. Oh, well, I'm thinking this could end up being a really, really useful, book, because I know a number of people who have gone from one gender to another,
Mhm.
and kind of an organic process, and I have a friend whose child is intersex
Oh
and
my goodness.
kind
Mhm.
of flipped back and forth and settled on what he wants to be, and it's a journey, I mean, it is a journey for a lot of people.
Oh my gosh, yes. Like you, I have known, people who have transitioned later in life, and people who have come out later in life. And yeah, intersex, I mean, I just assume that's always a journey, because, there's not a lot of education out there. around intersex. I don't really know how many like resources and things are available. But I read one time, and it has always stuck with me, that there are the same number of intersex people as there are redheads. So I always, it's like, think about how many redheads you've known in your life. And chances are you've probably known a similar number of intersex people. You just might not know that you know somebody who is intersex. So yeah, very, very interesting, very curious.
Interesting. They used to say that if during the AIDS crisis, there was a statement that if everyone who was gay woke up purple, we'd be flabbergasted how
Yeah,
many people were
yeah,
purple. So I
absolutely.
think it's a similar sort of thing.
I agree. I agree.
Well, tell people where they can find you and your books.
So you can find me on Instagram and Threads. Those are the only two social media platforms that I have. And it's literally going to be my name. So it is at Aubrey, the letter C, Houdeshell. Obviously, they're the same on both Instagram and Threads. I do have a website, which is my old business name, but it's www.graveyardroses.com, where you can, in fact, book a reading if you would like. And then as far as the Oracle of Pluto and the Cosmic Symposium are concerned, well, actually, it's true for all three. Okay. Like, you can buy them literally anywhere books are sold, big box, little box. There's all kinds of options. Otherwise, you can literally buy Stellar Sex on llewellyn.com. And then the other two you can buy on hachette.com, which is the mother company of Writing Press.
Writing Press, right. Excellent. Well, I thank you very, very much for hanging out and talking about all your work. And I look forward to the astrocartography book. Maybe you can come back. And everyone. So
thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You are very welcome. And everyone, you remember my forecasts are at empowermentunlimited.net, the Professional Aquarian YouTube channel, and omtimes.com. So ground yourself, everyone. It's going to be an incredible month. All right. Bye, everyone.